www.governamerica.com. And before the break, I was talking about the fact that now the floodplain maps, apparently FEMA now has released a new updated floodplain mapping system. And this happens regularly, by the way. And more and more we're seeing areas, and this is according to the Federal Emergency Management Agency themselves. They're saying that there are areas flooding now that have never flooded before. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we understand that the weather patterns are such that certain things happen. Well, we've never had more natural disasters, so-called, and I think in the history of the United States. I mean, we're seeing an acceleration of natural disasters, flooding in certain places, droughts in places where there's flooding not occurring. You know, and we know that for years, weather modification has been experimented with. We know China during the Olympics did weather modification to alter the weather patterns. They're very open about it over there. We're very covert about it over here. Our government is. We're not supposed to believe that these technologies exist. And in the meantime, whenever it floods in any certain area, you have FEMA being able to come in, clear the land, and we've talked a lot about this in the past. Floods make it very, very convenient for those who want to rebuild communities in a quote-unquote sustainable manner. So when you have a flood, you, out of necessity, have people forced off the land. And we know, we've covered in document after document after document on this program, that the land is to be cleared under Agenda 21. They want to get you out of the rural areas. They want to rebuild cities in accordance with sustainable development and stack them and pack them. So now we see out of NPR, Minnesota Public Radio, changes to floodplain maps mean more must-buy flood insurance. I say floods in the Fargo Moorhead area the past 2 years have prompted more people to buy flood insurance, but next year thousands more homeowners will be forced to buy flood insurance when FEMA changes its floodplain maps. When the Red Cedar River reached record levels last May, many residents got a better idea of how vulnerable the community is to flooding. If a levee had failed, floodwaters would have spread through the streets many blocks beyond the river. Steve Lindis and Allison Wallace live a mile from the river, but they realized that that would not protect them if the levees failed. Last year, there were some street flooding in places pretty far from the river. Keep in mind, Katrina comes back to mind, ladies and gentlemen. We know from eyewitness accounts there in New Orleans that the levees were apparently blown. They saw helicopters fly over the levees. They heard explosions around the levees. It was the breaking of the levees that flooded the cities. It wasn't the hurricane. Hurricane was already gone. This was an operation in New Orleans. And that's evident, too, by the very poor response. I mean, it seems to me like we're living in what is supposed to be the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, what is supposed to be the best organized country on the face of the earth, and yet we have nothing but a bunch of incompetent boobs in government. That's what we're supposed to believe anyway. A bunch of incompetent boobs, incapable of any kind of action in terms of crisis management. Everything they do only serves to exacerbate any problem that we have. And now we have this situation where, in New Orleans, the Gulf is another good example of that. I mean, every time, New Orleans, let's go back to that for a moment. What was the federal response? Turn away relief supplies. Cut off water to people. Gun down, go door to door, confiscating guns. Cut off communications. I mean, these are documented cases. We documented that stuff as all this stuff was going down. And they did the same thing with the Haiti situation. They had tons of relief supplies sitting there, and they left them sitting there and let the people starve. So this is the kind of homeland security we can look forward to if we rely upon the federal government. That's why, folks, I'm telling you, we have to support individual solutions. We have to be standing on our own 2 feet when crises hits, because we certainly can't count on the other side to provide for us. So whenever a community floods, these floodplain maps are redrawn again to reflect the new floodplain risk, the reality of the flood. And these people are, and as I said before the break, your community has to participate in the floodplain, the National Flood Insurance Program. If your community doesn't participate, you cannot get flood insurance because FEMA has the monopoly. And in order for your community to participate, they have to agree to whatever ordinances, whatever restrictions on the land for building permits and what have you, that FEMA dictates. And for many of these communities that have, for the first time, adopted the National Flood Insurance Program, FEMA openly brags in their documents that this was that community's first introduction to land restrictions, their first introduction to ordinances. All of this, by the way, is laid out in that article I mentioned earlier, Controlling the Land by Soaking the People. And that's why I think weather modification, experimentation, research needs to be exposed in a major way, because it's my opinion, it's my belief that tampering with the weather has become a tool in the hands of many people who operate behind the scenes and overtly in the government to put restrictions and get people off the land.